Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone that is joining us here today. My name is Andy Yost. I'm with the Capacity Building Center for Courts. With me facilitating on the phone today is Dr. Alicia Summers and David Kelly, as well as Scott Trowbridge, who will be helping me kind of steer the ship on Adobe Connect. We're glad that everyone could join us. This is if I'm counting right, the fourth time that we've gotten together using Adobe Connect. So we continue to work on that technology internally to make sure that it's as useful to all of you as possible. So to that end, let me just make a couple technical observations for everyone, and especially for those of you that are new to the Adobe Connect format. First of all, what you see in front of you is what we call a room, a virtual room. And you'll see several things on your computer. In the middle, you see some slides that we have, a slide deck that we have uploaded. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see an agenda and then some technical call-in information. Going forward, every time we have one of these calls, you can expect the same kind of home room layout. So if you ever are wondering what we're going to cover, what the topic is, or how you can call in, those directions will always be on the lower left-hand corner. In the center, you see that there's a group chat. Remember that the chat transcript is saved, and we are able to, at the end of the workshop, send out a summary of the transcript of the chat, a summary of any Q&A or poll results that we elicit from all of you during the call, and then, of course, a recording of the video and the audio of the workshop as well for those folks that couldn't make it. On the lower right-hand corner of your screen is a file sharing box. So today you'll see that we've uploaded the self-assessment report summary. It's a two-pager. If you want to download that, you can just click it, and then the download option will appear for you, and you can just download it right onto your computer. And then in the upper right-hand corner, we have a list of attendees. So that's the layout of the homeroom. We're here today to talk about the Court Improvement Program Self-Assessment Report for the fiscal year of 2014. Dr. Summers is going to walk us through that, and then we have a couple case studies that we're going to share with you as well. Last thing in terms of the technical side of the workshop today, there will be times when your screen's going to move around. I'll move some pieces around, or Scott may move some pieces around. Just know that that's totally planned, that your computer isn't falling apart, and allow us to kind of manipulate the room as we go along to focus on the pieces that we want to focus on. So I'm going to do one last thing, and then I'll hand the mic over to David just to give you a sense of the intent of the workshop. But I want to test and make sure that everyone's on the same page with me. So we're going to do a little gradients of agreement test. In the middle of your screen in the bottom, you see that there's a group chat box. I would like everyone to, on a scale of 1 to 5, determine their gradient of agreement with the following statement, where a 5 is, I absolutely think that's true 100%, and 1 is, there's no way I agree with that, I can't go forward if that's what we think we're really doing. The statement is this. And by the way, this is a big debate at my house right now. Cranberry sauce is better than gravy on Thanksgiving turkey. So on a scale of 1 to 5, just type into the chat box your gradients of agreement. See, we have some gravy fans in the room. Good. Darlene is a cranberry sauce fan as well. I'd love to get your recipe if you have one. Excellent. Julie is the outlier. She doesn't like either one. All right. Excellent. So that's great. It's sort of a silly question. David doesn't like anything on turkey. Sort of a silly question, but the tone of our workshops are hopefully serious fun, right? So now I know that everyone can respond in the group chat. They can hear me over the phone. And we'll use that gradients of agreement tool in this workshop and also in workshops into the future. So with that, I will be quiet. And David, if you'd like to talk a bit about the intent of the workshop, now the microphone is in your hand.
Terrific. Thanks a lot, Andy. So welcome, everyone. I'm pretty excited about today's call. This report and the ability to construct a report like this has been underway for a long time and required really an extraordinary amount of work from our newly configured research team, which is composed of a number of people, but the three that were most involved with this report are Alicia Summers, Vicki Weiss, and Tara Garlinghouse-Grigg, and I'm sure all of you know all three of these great folks. But the intent for the report is for this to serve as a tool for all of you to be able to have it your fingertips a resource that will allow you to know who's doing what around the country and a little bit about how they're doing it. We hope that this will encourage you to reach out for more peer-to-peer interactions, perhaps make trips to visit each other to learn about the work that you're doing. But this is one step that we hope to make as a contribution to better connecting everyone, collecting the knowledge that each CIP is generating independently, and to also paint a national picture of where resources are going, as well as identifying particularly innovative projects, particularly effective projects, and a wide range of those projects, so that no matter the size of the state you're in, no matter how you're structured, you can look at this report and have a good understanding of what your colleagues are doing. Perhaps you may want to do something similar. To connect this week's call to last week's call, clearly the way we ask for information, the way we ask you to report, and the substance and content of what we ask for directly affects our ability to produce useful information for you and for anyone that's interested in this program. So we wanted to follow up last week with a look at what's possible with this report. And we think with the changes to the self-assessment document this year that we'll have a much more timely and even more useful report to share with you next year. So with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Summers. We hope that this approach is more useful than simply just releasing a document. We thought that if we explain what went into it, the intention for it, what's included in it, and how to use it, that might be a more effective way to release it, to get feedback, etc. So, Dr. Summers?
Good afternoon, everyone, except my West Coast people. It's still morning here. And in Reno, it's a nice, beautiful, snowy morning here, our first big snow, so it's really lovely. So as David said, our purpose today is really to talk a little bit more about the report, not specifically to list out everything that we found, but to hit some highlights of what we learned, to talk a little bit about how we think this could be most useful. Of course, we're interested in hearing from you what you find most useful about it. But just to kind of give you an overview, we did send out the report to the CIP directors and coordinators yesterday. And I know that doesn't mean you'd have time to review it. It's a very large document. But just to give you an opportunity to have it in hand before this call, to start thinking about if you had any feedback on it before we release it more publicly. And we would like any feedback you might have by November 20th, because we would like to get this out for people. There's been a lot of interest. When we talked to the CIPs at the last CIP meeting, this was one of the number one things they asked for, that you guys asked for. You want to know what others are doing in the field, and we've really tried to do that. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the report, mostly focusing on what we included and why, and how we think that might be useful for the report. So if you have the report in front of you in PDF, there's a nice little trick over on the side if yours does bookmarks. We've bookmarked every section of the report, so you can jump straight to any section that you're interested in learning more about. You know, if you really want to know what's going on around a specific area, just jump right in. But overall, we start out, we have our national overview. This section is fairly brief. We talk about the methods that we used in selecting projects for inclusion in the report and our general methodology of how we decided to format and structure the report and what we were trying to achieve with that. Our national overview also has some numbers for you, which I will present here in just a second. But it gives you a general sense of what's going on in the field at a broad level. And then we try to move into some details. Also in the national section, we have something that we thought would be really useful as we were reading through the self-assessments. We read some states that we just thought, wow, they really have continuous quality improvement integrated into their entire approach to the work. And we were really impressed, and we were talking about that as a group, and we thought, let's highlight a couple of these. So we have some case scenario or case studies of different states around the country that we thought did really well with CQI integration. And I should say as a caveat while you're reading the report, you know, it was really hard to select states. There's a lot of great work out there, but we did our best to pull out some that we thought were innovative, that others would find interesting. And we also did our best to represent both larger and small states because we want you to see what's possible if you're one of the states that have less kids in care or smaller amounts of funding. So we try to pull examples from both, but it was really hard to make those decisions. So don't think because your state's not listed that we didn't think it was innovative or interesting. But we pulled out a couple here for CQI integration. We also broke down the report in terms of the specific topics. The topics were identified from the 2013 fiscal year data as the main topic areas across all the CIPs. And you're familiar with them because they were on the 2014 report. But these are, you know, your data projects, your quality hearings, quality representation, engagement, timeliness and permanency, well-being, and then ICWA and state court collaboration. So for each one of those, they have their own section that identifies both the national data for you and also has a couple case studies of states that are doing a project in that area to give you a little bit more depth than you would get otherwise in the report. Because our goal is to kind of summarize and say, hey, here's a little bit of information about a lot of different projects, and you can decide where you want to follow up. But this way you can get in depth in a couple and see if that's something that you found really interesting and you might want to talk to the state about. We also we went ahead and put in those quantitative responses to all the questions that were asked on the self-assessment. So we ask about your court improvement program and agency collaboration. We ask about the CFSR and collaboration around the CFSP, and we put those responses in there to give you a sense of what people are doing around collaboration. So there's some quantitative, you know, numbers just nationally, what people are doing around collaboration. We also ask you about your CQI challenges and needs. So that data is in there for you as well. And then the section that I think everybody really wants to see is the appendices. So the first part of the report is, you know, less than 40 pages, you know, 40-ish pages. And then the other 60 pages are basically data tables that are appendices that list out by topical area the states that are doing work on this with a very brief description of the work that they're doing. And I think that that's the part that people get most excited about. We do have that link throughout the document for you. So you can go to bookmarks and jump straight to the ICWA table if you're interested. But if you're also reading the specific topic description there, you could, there's a link within that. So if you're reading the section on well-being, there's a link at the top that takes you straight to the tables in the back. That's how our report is laid out to give you a sense of what it looks like. I know some of you have seen it already, and I already have some helpful feedback from some of the states, so I appreciate that. What we have in the report. So we have self-reported national numbers, and this will be the first numbers that you see when you start going through the report and we start presenting data. This is the percentage of the court improvement programs that reported activity by topical area. You can see data projects, 98% of CIPs said that they have some sort of data projects that are going on. And then you can see kind of down the list. So that's the most. Most CIPs have something under the data projects category, and it ranges down to 61% for ICWA, or state court collaboration projects. We think this is great to give you a general sense of what others are doing, how many people in the country are doing work on this area. It's really just an opportunity at a glance to say, hey, what did people say that they were doing? The caveat with this, and I'm going to talk next about why our numbers look a little different later on, but the caveat with this is self-reported entirely. And the way that we did this is we took your self-report and we went through, and if you had text underneath a category for data projects, we counted that as yes, you had a data project. Regardless of what the text was. If you self-reported a project and activity that you did anything in that area, we counted it for this graph. That also means, though, that it might overrepresent the number of states doing projects in a specific area because some projects might have got counted twice. What we learned when we were reading the reports is that some people put the same information in over and over again because the projects are related. So you might be doing a report on projects around timeliness, but as part of that, you're collecting well-being data. And so the project might be listed in both sections. And when we did our initial count, we didn't account for those variances. So these numbers might be a little high, but you can at least see the trends and where the majority of states are working on these projects. So you have some national numbers to use for reference that are broad across categories. And then you have the selected projects. Now, when we selected projects to include in the tables in the back, the numbers drop. So for example, if you look at this on the last slide, 90% of the states self-identified a timeliness and permanency project. When you go to the topic-specific section on timeliness and permanency projects, that number drops to 48.1% of states that are actually represented in there. And I know people catch on to this really quickly, so we wanted to explain it up front. In our method section at the beginning, we say how we selected projects. But I want to make it clear for everyone why these numbers might be different. One is because we did remove duplicates. So we took out things that were in one section and also repeated in another section. And what we did to kind of link those together is we added in the tables in the back, basically, hashtags. So we pulled out keywords that might link the projects, and then if your project was linked to another section, you would get the little hashtag with the keyword. For example, my example about the timeliness project, let's say you have a project that really focuses on timeliness, but you do capture well-being data. We would put that under the timeliness section, but in the description at the end, we'd put little hashtag well-being, and so you know that there's a link. That also makes it possible, if you want to know about all the well-being projects that have been identified that are reported in here, you can look in the well-being section, or you can search the document with the hashtag well-being, and it will pull up all of those that link to that as well. So we removed all the duplicates. We also tried to identify projects that were CIP-led, that were court-focused instead of agency-focused if there's a lot of collaboration. We also took out things like conference attendance. We recognize that that is an activity that probably a lot of states do, that it's important. You know, you're sending someone out to a conference for training purposes or to learn more about a project or activity, but we took out conference attendance or sending someone to some type of external training. We took those out. We took out work group participation. We didn't take out all work group activity. If you said my work group engaged in these activities, that was different than as part of my fiscal year, I participated in this work group. So we try to make it very activity-focused, project-focused. And then there were some activities in there that are definitely important to do, but we weren't sure how they would contribute to the overall knowledge of other CIPs and sharing, like we used some money to reprint all of our handbooks or bench books related to something. So we took out some things like that. We tried to be fairly selective and keep things in that we thought would be of interest to the other states, but also were kind of discrete projects that might give people ideas about what to do. But I should say it's not an exhaustive list. It doesn't cover everything, and we could only put the stuff in the table to the best of our ability based on the information that we had. And sometimes the information didn't quite give us enough, or we read it and we might have construed it as not being as court-focused as it was just because of how it was presented to us. So we know it's not a perfect system for identifying projects, but this is what we went with for this one to try to pull out things that we thought would be really valuable to the field. What you'll also see in there are topic-specific graphs that'll also give you some national data. So, for example, I put well-being in here as an example for this because it's our most diverse project area in terms of projects. We have this graph of the selected ones, so that's the more inclusive list. And you can see that a large portion are on education and early childhood development. You can also see that 9% of states are doing something around racial disproportionality and about 21% on trauma. So you get a sense of within a topic like well-being, what are people actually doing? And we do this for all of our topical areas. We also have a little graph that tells you whether people are in the planning or implementation phase. So this one's in the work on engagement, and these are all going to equal 100%. So of the topical areas on engagement, you can see the majority of states are in an implementation phase. think this is helpful because when you start identifying where you are in the work, you might want either to find someone who's in a similar phase and see what they're doing and engage in some discussions around what's been helpful for them or what's not, or you might want to talk to someone who's in a later stage of the work to get a sense of the lessons they learned in implementing a similar project. We wanted to break them down for you by phase so that you can see what's going on in the field. We also put together these handy little maps so you can identify the states and where they are. So if you're in the planning phase, you might want to look at the map and say, hey, looks like Florida's in the planning phase around this work. Maybe I need to go talk to Florida, someone who's in the same phase as me. Or maybe you say, Nevada's implementing this work. Maybe I need to go talk to Nevada because they're further ahead than I am. So it gives you a chance to see where they are. And the orange on this map is they're in both, so they have multiple projects in different stages of the work. So this just gives you an example of the maps that we did. We did one for every topical area and one in the tables for every subtopical area. So whatever you're interested in, there's a map that tells you who else is doing the work and what stage of the work that they're in. So what does that look like? I'm going to give you an example. If you went to the ICWA section, this is what you would have. You would have 2 pages of a little bit of narrative and these 3 graphs. So you would see that in ICWA activities, there's most of the work's around training and resource development. 28% are doing some sort of data collection, and the rest are doing work on state and tribal court collaboration. You can tell that, the state and tribal collaboration probably has the most people in a planning phase, which might be helpful, and you can see which states are engaged in the work. So it gives you some sense of who to go to, what's going on a national scale, whether you're in the same boat as others, or if you need to go to others to see how to move forward. We also, for every section, as I said before, we try to pull out some innovative projects. And for the ICWA section, North Dakota is one of our states that we thought was doing some interesting work around looking at ICWA compliance. So I've asked Heather from North Dakota to be on the call to talk a little bit about the work that they're doing so you can get a sense of the type of case examples that we've provided throughout the document.
And Heather, if I've muted you, it's *6.
All right, this is Heather. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name's Heather Trainer. I am the CIP research analyst here in North Dakota. I started my position in April, so this is all still fairly new to me, but ICWA is definitely a project that is very near and dear to us here. So I'll just kind of start by talking about how this began. A need was recognized to focus on ICWA compliance here in North Dakota. I guess when you look at the disproportionality in North Dakota with American Indian children who are represented in foster care, there's approximately 3 times, which is approximately 3 times their population frequency. So when they started the audit for fiscal year 2010, it was reported at that time that 27% of the 1,200 children we had in foster care at the time were Native American. So that's when we just started. We collaborated with the University of North Dakota Department of Social Work and contracted with the North Dakota court system here to conduct the ICWA audit. We had done a small ICWA audit before that, but the data wasn't representative enough to use as a baseline measure because there were different audit teams used throughout the state that appeared to be discrepancy in their interpretation. So that's why we just have one entity looking at that now. In the audit, the analysis, they analyzed and utilized documents that are scanned into our web-based court system, Odyssey. In Odyssey, the system includes scans of findings and orders for those ICWA cases, as well as return receipts related to notices for notification for ICWA and social work affidavits. The audit is based solely on information entered into that Odyssey court record. So it's not possible to make a full assessment of compliance with federal ICWA, but we're working on that as we run into snags here and there. During the audit, Melanie Sage, who is our contact up at the University of North Dakota, they look at and analyze pertinent information, qualitative information such as acknowledgement of efforts to assist parents, and combine the quantitative data such as whether the words active efforts appear in the findings. The data was looked at geographically by court districts. So that was about 19 counties out of our 53 here in North Dakota. And that's how we looked for trends. Currently, the ICWA auditors have completed the initial review of our statewide ICWA cases, and that was cases that reached disposition from 2009 to September of 2010. And those issues along the way are looked at by our CIP director, the ICWA subcommittee, and the CIP committee. Based on that audit, the identified areas of improvement were added to recommendations portion of the final audit. So after the CIP had gone over the audit, it was taken to the Administrative Council, the Supreme Court Administrative Council in May, and that initial audit was published for public access in May as well. Also at that time, the CIP committee and the ICWA subcommittee had put together a proposed action plan to address the areas of improvement included in the audit. So we've been working on that since we've had the audit results published in May. And that's kind of where we're at now with that after these audit results. The information audited looked at notice given to parents, notice given to the tribe, court findings that ICWA applies, parents informed of their right to appointed counsel. Other things we looked at, court findings regarding active efforts, use of QEW or qualified expert witnesses at those TPR hearings, and court findings that culturally relevant services were offered and provided. After the audit, there were a few things that we noted and that there was less compliance on, specifically culturally relevant services and QEW at that termination hearing. So we took those recommendations from the audit, put them into an action plan, and our subcommittee, ICWA subcommittee, met last week, and some updates on that and some examples of how we're using those recommendations is we've put an ICWA flag in the Odyssey system so we can track better all of the ICWA cases in those deprivation and TPR cases. We're updating the bench book for the judges with more definitions from the ICWA guidelines. We're working on developing a bench card for judges, and that's to be published soon, so they have that to access as well, and also a best practices guide for them. We've added placement preference language to the social services affidavit outline. And also this fall at our judicial conference, we're going to have a session or an ICWA workshop, which we're pretty excited about, focusing on compliance for QEWs and active efforts. We've involved the tribal court judges for that and the director of the Indian Affairs Commission, some QEWs, so we can kind of brainstorm and talk about these findings a little more to hopefully make our second round of audit, which is happening, look a little better. That's it for that audit portion. I also wanted to note that we have a second statewide ICWA compliance audit going on. That's just being conducted of one county, Ramsey County here. And those are looking at cases, and this one is not only court compliance, but we've contracted and signed a non-disclosure agreement with the Department of Social Services up there for Ramsey County, so we're able to access court records through the Odyssey system as well as social services records. And this audit is pretty cool because it's a 9-month audit, so the baseline data will be collected from records to assess for compliance with ICWA. And then based on the compliance, there will be a training following that and another record review looking at those key elements again. So we can kind of do a shorter study to look at our self-improvement and how we can develop those best practices implemented in jurisdictions throughout the state. And that audit is conducted by UND as well. So a lot going on with ICWA up here in North Dakota. Are there any questions?
Great. Thanks, Heather. Actually, with regard to questions, we're going to save questions for the last 5 or 6 minutes at the end of this report on the self-assessment. So thanks for your eagerness to solicit them. We'll ask people in a few minutes if they have questions, and they can use the raise their hand icon.
Okay.
So so thanks for that wonderful presentation. In the meantime, we'll jump back here to the main homeroom, and Dr. Summers will pick up with our review of the report.
And in thinking about our case examples, I think Heather gave a perfect one. There's some really interesting things going on. We pulled it out there. They have a university partnership, so there's researchers that they can rely on, but they're also really taking a close look at the data and what that means. And so our thought process in pulling out some of these case studies, as well as putting the information in tables, was this is a great resource. Talking to Heather would be a great resource to learn more about their work and see how that might inform the projects that you want to do in your state. The final piece of the ICWA example would be the tables that are in the appendices. I know this is kind of hard to read, but it's pulled directly. It's a snapshot of the page in the back that talks about the data collection and assessments that are going around ICWA. And you can see what percentage of states are doing something specific to this subcategory here. And then you have the state map to give you a sense of, thank you, Andy, to give you a sense of which states are doing work in this area and what phase they're in. All of our maps and graphs are color-coded the same way, so your planning and implementation should be the same colors, and the orange is both. So you should get a sense as you go through it what phase they're in and who's doing what in the area. But for ICWA, you can look at the national numbers, who's doing what, and then jump down to the table. You can see here, we've tried to put in the states and just brief information. Some states are doing multiple projects in the same area. We try to talk about all of those, but really it's just a sentence or two, and then we'll add in the keyword if it links to something else. And we know that may not be enough information to know everything that they're doing or the complexity of the projects of the states, because there's some really fascinating work out there. But we hoped it would be something to get you started, or at least identify when there's something that's similar or something that you might like to follow up on and learn a little bit more about. So that's what you would get if you were looking in the ICWA section. You'd get those 3 graphs, the national overview information. You would get some case studies from different states around the country, and then you'd have a link that you could jump back to the appendix, and there will be appendix for all of the subsections. So state tribal collaboration, data collection and assessment, and training and resource development for those. Some of the things that we learned, and if you have the 2-page summary that is available, and it will be available back up here on again to download. These won't be new to you. They're basically the things that we've identified in there. There's some of the key points that we learned from looking at the self-assessment report. I should say it was a fascinating process. We all learned new things and interesting things going on. And so the team that worked on it, we would debrief on the phone and be like, did you know what so-and-so's doing? This is a great project, and we think others would really be excited to hear about this. So it was a really great learning process for us as well. We found that there's just a diverse array of projects that the CIPs are working on. So there's so many different topical areas, different focuses, different innovative ways to look at the work. We were really impressed with that. But we also found that there's some consistency in our focus areas. There's a lot of states doing court observation work and looking at quality of hearings. There's a lot of states that identify quality representation as a focus area and had some very similar projects. So we did see some consistency that we think will help in building, pulling peers together to talk about what they're doing. We did also find that the ICWA and state tribal court collaboration is probably the least identified area of work. And if you look at our discrete projects, we had 32 states that were doing work in this area. When we pulled out the projects that we identified in the table, it's 21 states that are doing work in this area, and that's our lowest number. So that was important for us to determine why we think that is, or if there are resources that are needed from us to do this work. We also found when we looked at the responses from the CFSR question that 52% of states identified that they were doing coordinated projects with the agency, that they have around shared outcomes. So excited to hear that. When we looked at the CSQI question, there was a lot of overlap in what you identified as a need. a lot of resource needs, researchers, someone who's familiar with data, just time to do this work, but also data seems to be an issue across the country. What do we do with our data? How do we collect data? How do we analyze and interpret data? And those are great for us to learn because it helps us determine resources we can allocate for this. And then how do we measure our performance? How do we monitor a practice or a program that we put into place in a meaningful way and use that to make adjustments and determine whether or not we want to keep the project? And the last thing that we learned that we thought was great is that there's a lot of great use or integration of continuous quality improvement into projects. You know, we did see some instances where we can't really tell how well people are employing this model with their work, but then we saw some states that seem to have really embraced this, that it's in their approach to everything that they do, and just some really good models. We did see a lot of great use of CQI, and people really embracing this and using a model of, you know, we're only doing things that should lead to specific outcomes, and we're monitoring our work, and we're using data to drive our decisions, and we thought it was great. And one of them that we highlighted at the beginning was the great work that they're doing in Minnesota. We thought that Minnesota did an excellent job of integrating CQI into their day-to-day approach to the work in all of their projects. And I've asked Judy Nord from Minnesota to be on the call and talk to us a little bit just about their approach.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you. So Minnesota uses data to inform almost all of our projects. There's a few that we don't use data for, but it informs almost every project on which we embark. And I'll just give examples of a couple of them, one at the state level and a couple of them at the more local or county levels. So at the state level, we use data from both the courts, that the courts develop, and data from the Department of Human Services, which is our state agency. We have a really strong collaborative approach with our state agency, and we work together on literally every project that we have. And so we know statewide there's data that the counties want to be able to use with their local Children's Justice Initiative teams. In Minnesota, every county has a CJI team, and at least once each year, and hopefully going forward it'll be probably twice a year, we provide each of the teams with a set of data that includes both child welfare data and court data. So from the child welfare side, we provide information about the percentage of children in foster care for longer than 2 years. And we develop that data for every county, and we send it out. It also includes the percentage of children placed with relatives, the percentage of children who re-enter foster care, the percentage of children having physical examinations and mental health screenings. So that's just one example of some data that we send out. And the data table looks the same every year, and we try to give at least 2 or 3 years worth of data so that they can see what their trends are for their local communities. In addition to that, the chart also includes court data. For example, how long is it taking to achieve permanency? So from the time a child's removed from home until the court issues the permanency decision, so either adoption or a transfer of custody to a relative, how long is that taking? How long is it taking to achieve adoption and things like that? So we send that out to the counties, and in addition to sending out, then when we do our annual meetings, we do regional meetings across the state pretty much every year. We do 10 of those regional meetings where we bring all of the teams together, and we talk about the data, and we have them develop an action plan for their county to identify which pieces of data do they want to work on. What is it that they're seeing as an issue? What intervention do they plan to implement? How do they plan to measure whether they're making any headway and making improvements? And then how are they going to review it? We then collect those action plans, and we send them back to the counties about every 6 months asking for updates. How are they doing? And that does two things. It reminds the counties that they should be working on that information, and that's what they had said that they would be working on. And it also helps us at the state level to better understand if there are trends statewide or topics or issues statewide that we need to focus on with resources and other assistance. That's kind of at the high-end level. We also do some individual targeting, again using data similar to what North Dakota did. We have a high incidence of children in foster care, Indian children in foster care. So as we looked at our data, we attempted to figure out where there's some pockets around the state where that seems to be happening more than in other areas. And we had implemented a pilot project. So rather than doing something statewide, we implemented a pilot project in a couple of our counties where we first did some training, and then we are working on some new proposed orders and checklists and things like that the judges, the social workers, and the attorneys can use to see if that provides better guidance about why kids are being removed and how we can better return them home and more quickly. We're in the middle of the implementation process for that particular project. In the next few months, we will go back and look and see how things are going, probably do another little bit of an evaluation to see if things have improved. If they haven't, after looking at the data, we'll then see if there's another type of project that we could intervene with, something that might help that we haven't thought of. So we just keep doubling back. We implement a project. After looking at the data, we will work with the counties to implement the project. Then we'll go back and review and analyze it and see if there were improvements made. And if not, we go back again and we start all over again. Along those lines, the last thing I would mention is that we've had to become somewhat flexible. I shouldn't say had to be. We want to be flexible as we use our data. There are times when we're ready to go and implement what we think is a great project, only to find out that the data that we have may not be the highest quality data. And so before moving forward, we first want to make sure the data is accurate. And that happened with one of our projects that happened to be an ICWO-related project, where before we could move forward on the project, we first had to go back and do some training for court staff on proper data entry procedures. We then waited a few months until the data seemed to be more accurate. And then based on that, we changed our plan for training and for some other related projects. So those are the kind of the 2 or 3 high-end types of data projects that we work on at the state level and then at the county level.
Great. Thank you. I'm sorry, Alicia, let me just jump in here 1 second. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm wondering, Alicia, do we want to take some questions for a couple minutes, or do you want to move on toward the wrap-up?
Go ahead and take some questions. If anybody has questions for Judy or Heather about their projects in their state, raise your hand, and Andy will call on you.
That's right. And for those of you that are on the call, to raise your hand, in the Adobe room, to raise your hand at the top of your screen, there's a little icon of a person with their hand raised. Just push that button, and I'll see that you raise your hand and call it on. We'll give it a few more seconds here. It looks like Julie has a question. Go ahead, Julie.
Thanks. I would like to hear more about Minnesota's these data teams from each county. Can you tell me more about that? That just blows me away.
Sure. It's something we've had in place for about 15 years now. When our Children's Justice Initiative started in the year 2000, we decided rather than having just statewide advisory committee, every county would have a committee. And I think many states have a model similar to this. But we have 87 counties. Each county has a Children's Justice Initiative team that is led by a juvenile court judge, and comprised of all of the key stakeholders. So there might be some other juvenile court judges on there. There are court administration staff, social workers, guardians ad litem, county attorneys, parents' attorneys, kids' attorneys, and so on. They meet regularly to talk about process and procedure in their communities and what they can do better. And they also work on data that we send to them or topics that we send to them that we think are important. I have what's called a CGI implementation guide that I developed years ago that we used at a statewide child protection summit where I think many states started to develop this model. If anyone is interested in seeing that implementation guide, just send me an email and I'm happy to share it.
I would. This is Julie.
Okay, Julie, if you want to just send me an email, that would be great.
Do I have your email? Is it on the screen anywhere?
I'm sure it is. I'll just give it to you really quick so we don't take up time. It's judy.nord at courts.state.mn.us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks for the question, Julie. We have another question from Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, this is a follow-up question to that. It seems to me, or I'm inferring, Judy, that if you're sharing data with them and they're making decisions about policies and procedures, it seems that these groups could take it upon themselves to do what we might describe as an intervention on the county level. So is there a way that you know what those are?
The answer is yes and yes. So they are implementing their own interventions based on their needs, their capacity, and their resources. And in the action plans that they provide to us during each of our annual, well, I shouldn't say annual, they're now biannual regional team meetings, I get to see what those interventions are supposed to be. And then I try not to do it often because I don't want people to feel like I'm bugging them, but I'll usually say send off an email maybe every quarter, something like, so how are things going? Here's the statewide list of what everybody said that they were doing. How is it going? What did you actually implement? What intervention? How did that work? If it didn't work, did you try something else? So it's me kind of bugging them, and don't always have to do that. Many counties just write back to me without any prompting to say, hey, this was our problem and this is what worked, and maybe you can share it with some of the other counties. And that's why I kind of stay on top of it, because we've learned some wonderful, really exciting new ways of working on a project or an issue that many other counties have, and then I'm able to share it with all the counties.
Great, thank you.
Good, thanks for your question, Scott. We'll leave it open for about 30 more seconds here if folks have any other questions they'd like to ask of David, Dr. Summers, or Heather, or Judy. All right.
Hi, this is Allison from Colorado.
Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
And hi, how's it going? Heather, I was wondering if you could just give me your email so I can send you a couple questions that way, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's htraynor, so HTRAYNOR @ndcourts.gov.
Thank you, sister. I'll be in touch.
Awesome.
And this is David. I just want to add that we will redistribute the most recent contact list we have. I think that we sent one out a while back, but things change. And moving forward, we'll have a way to keep track of all contacts on one of the shared spaces that will soon be launched for everyone. So love that these connections are happening. We want to make them as easy as we can.
Great. Thanks, David. And we'll move on now for some wrap-up and closing comments from Dr. Summers, and then we're going to ask you all to respond to a poll as well.
So for a quick wrap-up, to talk about how we were thinking about this project, some of the things that we thought it would be used for. We thought people could use this as a national comparison. So in thinking about what's everyone else doing, what am I doing in comparison to everyone else? Where's a lot of focus in these areas? We thought it would make a nice national comparison to see what is the focus of our work. We also thought it would be great to pull up some innovative ideas. We expanded on several, but the tables in the back are just full of ideas of what others are doing. So if you want to do some work or have identified a need to do some work around quality hearings or quality representation, this is a great place to start looking for ideas to see how others are addressing this issue. And as you're thinking about that, my thought is don't forget the keyword search, because you could look up, the hashtag timeliness and find even more projects that are actually listed in the table itself for that section. So I thought it'd be good for idea generation. And then ultimately our goal is to make it an opportunity for you to learn from each other. So, if you ask, how did Colorado do this? How did California do this? How did New York do this? It shows you some examples of what others in the field are doing. And whether they're in a planning or implementation phase, it helps you identify if you need someone in the same stage as you or someone a little later in the progress. Ultimately, it helps you identify persons that you could outreach to learn a little bit more about their work and how to use that. And just as a final tip in working with the report and making it useful to you, we did try to put in, as a reminder, the little bookmarks and the hashtags to make things easier to work your way through the report because it's so long. So if you really have one area you're more interested in than others, use those to jump around in the document and get what you need.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Summers, for that wrap-up. We appreciate it. What we have now is an opportunity we'd like to take to gather some information from you all. One of the themes, as Dr. Summers said earlier in the call, that we constantly hear from CIP, and it's a good theme obviously, is that CIP would like an opportunity to continue to share and learn from each other in a peer-to-peer relationship. So what we've done on the screen here is created a poll. It's really a two-step poll. So here are the instructions. The first thing we'd like you to do is respond to the poll that's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen entitled CIP Peer-to-Peer Sharing Poll. And the question states that CIPs have expressed an interest in learning more about the work their peers are doing. We're interested, that is, the Center for Courts is interested in what you would find most helpful in learning about your peers' network. Please choose your top two options. So, please do exactly that. Pick your top two options, not 3 or 4, by the way. And we'll use this data to drive the decisions and the connections that we make going forward. Step 2 of the poll is this. If you choose other as your as one of your two options, we'd ask that in the bottom of the screen you'll see a what is your other box. And it says if you choose other in the poll above, please describe what you'd like to learn from CIP here. And then there's a blank box that says type answer here. If you choose other, please just go ahead and type into that box what it is you'd like to share, or what kind of opportunities for information sharing and the kinds of information that the kinds of tools, resources, information, lessons that you would like to share might be. So we'll leave this poll open for about 2 minutes. Looks like a lot of folks might not need the full 2 minutes, but I see a few answers are coming in. So we'll leave it open for no more than 2 minutes, and when the answers start to slow down, we'll move on. Again, we're able to capture your responses, both the poll results and the short answer results that you're typing in, and we can include those in the call summary that we'll produce after this call. So we'll take just about 40 more seconds here if we need it. Yeah, you all are getting good at this polling thing. It's going a lot faster now. That's great. All right, so it looks like the poll results have slowed here and people have had a chance to respond, so that's great, which means we'll be able to end the call a few minutes early. So from our end at the Center for Courts, we really appreciate everyone joining today and participating in today's activities. I know that we have a few more minutes left here, so we're going to ask a couple things. One is, if you will respond to one more poll, we're looking for a little bit of feedback. In the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see there's one more poll, and the poll is pretty simple. Was the content of this presentation useful to you? And again, we'll use your responses to this poll and similar polls like it for our own internal CQI processes so that we keep refining what we present to you to meet your needs as opposed to just things that we feel like we could say. And then we have about 5 more minutes left on the call. Once you've responded to the call, you're free to go. You can just log out. But I will stay on the phone, and Dr. Summers and David, if you're available, can stay on the phone for the last 5 minutes. And if anyone has a question that they'd like to ask anyone from the Center for Courts, you can do that. We'll leave a 5-minute open space here. You can ask a question one of 2 ways. Either just type it into the group chat, and we'll respond to it there and read it, or you can raise your hand, and I'll call on you over the phone. Either one is fine with us. Otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
I'm not seeing any questions, and it looks like we're going to have a smaller polling result here at the tail end of the call, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, David, I actually see, you're right. I was noticing that same thing. Looks like Rob Shelley has a question. Rob, go ahead.
I do. Hey, David. I heard at a recent meeting that I attended something about funding, and I wasn't sure if I should call you directly about that or not. Just about the funding stream for court improvement and how maybe there's been some change with some recent legislation or some recent rules. Can you comment on that at all, or no?
Yeah, although I don't think it'll be particularly helpful. So we still continue to expect to be funded at the same levels that we always have been, but from what I understand, in a recent, well, not so recent, within the last year, there've been some budget process changes, from what I understand, and that may affect what part of the federal budget our funding comes from.
Yeah, it was my understanding it kind of moved out of the baseline budget.
Yeah, so it's not a concern for us at this point. We've been aware that there was a reinterpretation several months ago about where the funds are coming from, but at this point we don't have any concerns that they won't continue.
Can you give us the name and address of the guy who did that? Can we go call him and talk?
Afraid not, Rob, but I appreciate the advocate within you.
No, I wasn't advocating for anything bad there.
I know you well and trust your judgment. Yeah, I think that a couple of people have reached out. Maybe they were part of the same meeting that you were in. But there is a major advocacy group that has brought this up a few times recently, and it's spooked some people, but we are not spooked here.
Okay, all right. I had the feeling that if anything were afoot, that we would probably hear something. I didn't think your hands would be tied to the point that you couldn't say anything. So
right.
Yeah, and I too, from what I know of you and dealing with you and your crew, have nothing but trust. So just was curious.
Goes both ways. The one update I do have is that the CIP funds will be distributed pretty soon. all have been approved by the Children's Bureau in awards. At this point, it looks like awards might come in 2 installments, with about 75% of the money coming here in the next couple of weeks, and the remaining 25% a little later.
Okay. All right. Thanks, David. I wasn't sure if this was the right venue or not, so I wanted to wait till the end. But
no, there's never a wrong time to ask those questions. So, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, all.
All right, so we're right up at 1 o'clock here Mountain Time, so we'll go ahead and call it a day. Again, for those of you that are still on the phone, thanks very much for your time, and we look forward to our next call together.
Thanks, everybody.